Hey everyone, and welcome back to our course. This week we're talking about utilitarianism. So we're continuing with Unit 2 about moral philosophy or ethics. And so we're talking about utilitarianism, which is an ethical theory. It's a theory of what makes actions right or wrong, what actions are right or wrong. So it's going to compete with Kantianism, which we talked about last week. And I'm going to try to divide the lectures for this week into some smaller, more easily digestible videos. So there are going to be multiple videos for this week, but they'll all be shorter than like the hour and 20-minute Kantianism lecture video from last week. So hopefully that'll be a little easier to digest, a little easier on your bandwidth, if nothing else. So you don't have to watch all the videos all at once. But they will, all the lecture slides will be in one document on Blackboard. So you don't have to like find and download multiple lecture slide documents, but there will be multiple lecture videos. So a brief sort of overview for what we're going to do. First, I want to talk about deontology versus consequentialism. So Kantianism is a form of deontology, but utilitarianism is a form of consequentialism. And deontology and consequentialism are two different categories of ethical theories. And so comparing and contrasting those can be helpful in understanding sort of what our options are for having an ethical theory. And then we're going to, once we are finished with that, then we're going to move into utilitarianism. We're going to ask, what is utilitarianism? And ask, why be a utilitarian? Why do utilitarians think that this view is correct, that this is the right theory of morality? And then once we talk about that, then we're going to move into objections to utilitarianism. So we're going to talk about the utility monster and the experience machine, both of which are thought experiments designed to attack or to argue against utilitarianism, to argue that utilitarianism is incorrect. So that's the plan for this week. So first, we're going to start off with a brief review, a recap of deontology, which we talked about last week, but we're going to go through it again briefly just so we can compare it to consequentialism and compare it to utilitarianism. So, Kantianism, deontology. Deontology says that morally right just means following the moral rules. Basically, any deontological theory or any version of deontology is going to try to essentially reduce morality to rule following. As long as you are following the right moral rules, you are doing the morally right thing. You are doing something morally wrong if and only if you are breaking one of the moral rules. So we have some set of moral rules, and we are good as long as we follow them, and we're bad whenever we break them, morally speaking. And so Kant and Kantians, more generally, think we use rationality to determine what the moral rules are. Thinking logically, we'll be able to discover the moral rules, and then that our rationality will force us to obey those moral rules. Behaving rationally means or requires behaving morally and obeying these moral rules for Kant. Deontology has many versions, some of which are not Kantian. So you can be a deontologist and still think Kant specifically is wrong. As long as you think that morality is just a matter of following the right rules, you are a deontologist. Doesn't matter what you think those rules are, you're still a deontologist, as long as you think morality boils down to following the right rules. Now, Kant, in his specific form of deontology, thinks we derive all moral rules from the principle of ends in themselves. So in the bridge case, pushing the large person off the bridge to save 5 people is wrong because you use the large person as a mere means to save the lives of the 5 people. You are using them as just a tool for your goal of saving these 5 people, but you're not considering or you're not treating the person you're pushing off the bridge as a person, as someone with their own thoughts, feelings, goals, desires, ends, their own sort of projects they're working on, their own goals that they want to work towards. And so you're disregarding their ends, their goals, by pushing them off the bridge and sacrificing them to use as a tool to save the 5 people that you want to save. And so it's morally wrong to push the person off the bridge because it violates the principle of ends in themselves in the Kantian case. Now, Kant thinks that we cannot break the moral rules under any circumstances. And this is this is not universal, but this is common to a lot of deontological theories. Morality just is obeying the moral rules. So if you break a moral rule, then you behaved immorally. And Kant thinks there's a moral rule not to lie. So, as we talked about last week, even if a murderer is asking you where their victim went, or their would-be victim, where the person they're trying to kill went, and you know where the victim is, you know where they are, Kant thinks you have to tell the truth to the murderer. You have to say, yes, right this way. You have to direct them. You have to give them the information they want, because it would be wrong to lie to them. To say, no, I don't know, would be a lie. And lying is always wrong because there's a moral rule not to lie. So violating that rule is automatically morally wrong. That's Kant's deontological picture. You cannot lie. You cannot break the moral rule. Even if lying would save a life, even if you would save lives by lying, you still can't lie on the deontological Kantian picture. Because as long as you're breaking the moral rule, you have done something morally wrong, and that's the end of the story. So deontology only cares about whether or not you follow the rules. It doesn't care about how bad the consequences of you following those rules might be. If you telling the truth means an innocent person gets murdered, you still have to tell the truth because there's a moral rule against lying. So even if someone gets murdered because you follow the moral rules, you still have to follow the moral rules. It's still morally wrong for you to break the rules, even if breaking the rules would save a life or would save multiple lives. So the consequences of your action don't play a role in determining whether your action was right or wrong. Even if you telling the truth means an easily preventable murder occurs, an innocent person gets murdered because you refuse to lie, you still did the right thing, according to deontology, because you followed the moral rules. So the consequences, the outcomes, how bad things turn out as a result of you obeying the moral rules, does not play a role in determining whether or not you did the right thing. Even if things go great, because you lied and people didn't get murdered, the murderer got caught, they went to jail, they didn't murder anyone else. Even if everything works out great because you told one little lie, you still did something morally wrong on the deontological picture because you lied and you broke a moral rule. So good consequences, saving lives, doesn't mean you did the right thing. And bad consequences, like letting people get murdered, doesn't mean you did the wrong thing. You can do the right thing and people get hurt as a result. You can do the wrong thing and save lives. So whether or not your action has good consequences doesn't play a role in determining whether or not your action was right or wrong. It's just a matter of whether or not you followed the rules. Even if following the rules goes really poorly, you still have to follow the rules, and following the rules is still the right thing to do, even if you're causing preventable murders. So even if terrible things will happen because you followed the rule, following the rule is still the right thing to do, according to the deontologist. And as most people agree, I think, historically, when looking at the Kant's murderer at the door case, that seems like a problem. Most people agree that that seems like a problem. You should lie to the murderer to prevent them from murdering someone. Like that's most people's intuition. That's the answer that seems right when thinking about that thought experiment, the murderer at the door case. And so some philosophers and ethicists historically have argued that the whole deontological rule following picture is a mistake, that we should be looking at the outcomes of our actions, the consequences of our actions when deciding what's right and wrong. What matters, or what should matter, in deciding whether your action was good or bad, was right or wrong, what should matter is, did your action make the world a better place or a worse place? Was the outcome good or was the outcome bad? Did you help people or did you hurt people? That's the question that should matter in morality, some philosophers have argued. Not this whole rule following thing. Not lying sounds like a great rule until lives are on the line. Then you should totally lie to save lives. That's way more important. That's the initial thought that we might have when looking at these sort of murder at the door cases. We might think, okay, rule following just isn't the right thing to look at in deciding what's morally right and morally wrong. We need something else. We need to be able to consider the consequences of our actions. Did you save a life by lying? Then good. You should have lied there. Saving a life is worth lying. Did someone die because you refused to lie to a murderer? That means you did something wrong. You should have lied there. And so if we want to look to consequences, we need to give up deontology. We need to let go of the rule following deontological Kantian picture. And we need a new theory of morality. We need a new kind of theory of morality. And that's where consequentialism comes in. So consequentialism is an alternative to deontology. Deontology is a category of ethical theories that say following rules, following the right set of rules, is what it means to be morally good. Consequentialism disagrees. Consequentialism says following rules is not what makes us right. It's not what makes us wrong. Breaking rules doesn't make us bad. Following rules doesn't make us good. What makes us good or bad is, were the outcomes or consequences of our actions good? Or were the consequences of our actions bad? Did our actions make the world a better place or a worse place? That's what matters in morality. That's what consequentialism says. And so utilitarianism, which is the subject of our discussions this week, utilitarianism is a form of consequentialism. There are many versions of consequentialism, but utilitarianism is the most common form. And so consequentialism is the view that the consequences or outcomes of an action are what make the action moral or immoral. So lying isn't necessarily good or necessarily bad. What matters is, did the specific lie you told have good outcomes that made the world a better place, or did it have bad outcomes that made the world a worse place? That's what consequentialism is. It's just the view that consequences of your actions are what decide morality. The outcomes of your actions and decisions. It's the outcomes. It's the effects that your actions have on the world. That's what decides whether your action was moral or immoral. That's what decides whether you did the right thing or the wrong thing. Did your action have a positive effect on the world or a negative effect on the world? So better outcome, better effects on the world means better action automatically. So what rules it violated or what rules it obeyed doesn't matter. No worries here about what rules we're following. It's just on a case-by-case basis, did your actions make the world a better place, or did your actions make the world a worse place? And so whether an action is right or wrong depends solely on what happens because of the action. It depends solely on what that action caused. Did it cause good things to happen, or did your action cause bad things to happen? And so consequentialism, as a result, is what's called impartial and impersonal, meaning it doesn't care about your intentions. So your beliefs, what rules you're following, what rules you're trying to follow, none of that matters. All that matters are sort of the empirical effects that your action had on the world. So as a result, if you remember the Schuyler and Trine thought experiment, the heads and hearts thought experiment that we talked about at the beginning of class, Schuyler and Trine both protect and shelter Jewish people from the Nazis. They protect and save the same number of people, but they do it for different reasons. Trine does it out of empathy, out of an emotional reaction to seeing suffering. She's driven to help because she empathizes and sympathizes with people suffering. Schuyler has no warm fuzzy feelings, doesn't really like people, but she thought about it. She decided she had a moral obligation to act and to save these people, even though she didn't really want to, or maybe she didn't really feel anything about their suffering. She had a moral obligation to save them, and so she did. Consequentialism says that Schuyler and Trine are equally good, because consequentialism says who they are as a person or what they're like or why they did it does not matter at all. Consequentialism doesn't care why they were acting in this way, why they were saving people. Consequentialism only cares about the fact that they were saving people. They saved lives, and they saved the same number of lives. So they were equally good. So neither of them gets more or less moral credit than the other. So Immanuel Kant thinks that Schuyler acted out of duty and Trine acted out of emotion. So Schuyler is better. Schuyler gets moral credit for her actions and Trine doesn't. That's Kant's view. But consequentialists don't think that there's a difference here. Schuyler and Trine did the same action, had the same outcome, had the same effect on the world, and so they are equally good. As long as their actions had the same effects, saved the same number of people, then they're equally good, because why they save people does not matter at all. So it's impartial and impersonal in that way. Why you did it, what you're like, what drives you personally to do these things does not matter to the consequentialist. It's just a matter of what effects did you have on the world. And that's a sort of objective empirical question. What did your action cause? So sort of personal features like empathy and rationality, those don't play a role in determining whether you get moral credit for your actions or whether your action was good or bad. So for the consequentialist, we can look at everything that matters and everything that doesn't matter in two columns. What matters, the outcomes of your actions. That matters. End of list. That's all that matters in determining whether your action was good or bad for the consequentialist. The outcomes of your actions. That's it. So that means in the doesn't matter column, we have intentions, the rules that you're following, who's doing the action, why they did the action. None of that matters. All of that is in the doesn't matter column for the consequentialist. The only thing that matters in deciding whether something was morally good or morally bad is what outcome it had, what effect on the world it had. That's it. And now, the most common form of consequentialism is utilitarianism. And so that's going to be what we talk about next, but I'm going to do that in a separate video. So I'm going to stop this video now, and we will pick back up in the next video.